A man who has built something real doesn't need to raise his voice to make a point. He just stops talking. And the night my daughter looked me across my own dinner table and told me I was never really a father to her, I didn't argue. I didn't defend. I set my fork down, folded my napkin, and gave her exactly what she said she wanted. I own 4 auto body shops in Columbus. Started the first one in 1991 with a leased bay, a used compressor, and $11,000 I'd borrowed from my father-in-law and paid back inside 2 years. My wife, Marianne, likes to say I built the whole thing on black coffee and stubbornness, and she's not entirely wrong. 34 years later, the shops run themselves for the most part. Good managers at each location, a bookkeeper who knows my filing system better than I do, enough steady insurance contracts to keep the lights on through any slow January. Our daughter grew up watching me work. She'd sit in the waiting room at the original shop on Morse Road doing homework on a folding table while I finished estimates after school. She knew what it cost. Or I thought she did. She married Shane 2 years ago. Spring wedding, outdoor venue, everything she'd ever wanted since she was old enough to describe it out loud. I paid for the venue, the catering, the florist, the photographer. There was also a $20,000 loan I extended to the two of them 6 months before the wedding because Shane's credit wasn't where it needed to be, and they'd found an apartment in Worthington they loved. I drew up a simple promissory note. Monthly payments, no interest, because she's my daughter and I'm not a bank. They made 2 payments. Then the payments stopped. When I brought it up the following spring, Shane said they were in a tight spot. My daughter looked at the floor, and I let it go. That's what you do when you love someone more than you love being right. By Christmas this year, Shane had been through 3 jobs in 24 months. Project manager at a logistics company, sales rep for a software firm, something in commercial real estate that never got explained to me properly. Each time there was a reason it hadn't worked out, and each reason made complete sense the way explanations always make sense when somebody needs them to. I gave my daughter the benefit of the doubt every time because Marianne kept asking me to, and Marianne has always been smarter about people than I am. But I watched. Marianne had the house done up the way she does every December. Wreath on the door, candles in every window, the smell of pot roast because she's been making the same Christmas Eve pot roast since 1989, and no one has ever once suggested she stop. I'd been up since 6, old habit from 30 years of opening the shops at 7. I had coffee on the back porch, watching the neighbors' kids vibrate with Christmas Eve energy, and I thought about everything I had to be grateful for, and I meant it. They arrived at 6. My daughter hugged me the way she always does, both arms, chin on my shoulder, and for a second she was 7 years old again, and I forgot every quiet thing I'd been keeping track of. Shane clapped me on the back. Looking good, Clyde. I thanked him and meant it about 2%. Dinner went fine at first. Marianne talked about her sister's knee surgery. My daughter mentioned a promotion she'd been passed over for, the kind of mention designed to land softly without being examined. Shane ate 2 helpings of pot roast and refilled his wine glass 4 times. I counted. I'm not proud of counting, but I counted. Dessert was Marianne's apple pie, same recipe her mother used, and Shane waited until Marianne was cutting second slices before he cleared his throat and said he wanted to share something exciting. I set my fork down. I want to tell you about an opportunity, he said. I recognize that word the same way you recognize a car pulling out without signaling. You've seen it 100 times and you still can't quite stop in time. He explained it was an investment. A clean energy company out of Denver called Lumis Ventures. Battery storage technology for residential solar. Scaling fast, pre-IPO round, projections that sounded like whoever wrote them had been paid by the decimal point. My daughter's college friend Becca had gotten in early and was already seeing returns on paper. The buy-in for the current round was $160,000. They had 40 of it. Shane's year-end bonus from the real estate work that had never fully been explained to me, and they needed us to cover the rest. $120,000. I let that number breathe for a moment the way you let a hot engine cool before you open the hood. That's a significant ask, I said. Shane had the pitch ready, he'd practiced it. He actually had a 1-sheet printed and folded in his jacket pocket, which he unfolded on the table next to the pie. Logos, projected returns, a pull quote from a Forbes article I'd never seen. Everything neat and professional in the way things look neat and professional when someone has put in real effort to make them look that way. Where did Becca find this? I asked. She's been in sustainable energy for 3 years. She knows the space. What's the fund manager's registered name with the SEC? A pause, small but measurable. It's a small team right now, my daughter said, stepping in the way she does when Shane needs a moment. The principals are listed on their site. Is this an accredited investment offering? Do you have the offering memorandum? Dad, her voice lower, a warning. I'm asking what I'd ask about anything, I said. Not because I think you're being foolish, because this is $120,000, and I'd like to understand exactly what we're putting it into. She set her fork down, and when my daughter sets her fork down, it's not the fork that's finished. You know what the problem is, she said. Her voice had gone flat and steady in a way that took me a second to name. You know what the problem has always been, Dad? You. You have never once, not once in my entire life, believed that I was capable of making a good decision on my own. That isn't true. You've thought Shane was a failure since the week we got married. You never gave him a real chance. Every single thing we've tried to build, you've had an objection ready. The apartment, the loan you've turned into a debt that hung over every conversation, the wedding. I paid for that wedding because I wanted to. You paid for it so we'd owe you. She was crying now, quick and furious, the way she used to cry as a teenager when the anger was bigger than what she had to contain it. Now we bring you one real opportunity, and you sit there running interrogations like we're strangers who wandered in off the street instead of your family. Tara, Marian's voice was soft. No, she shook her head. I need to say this. She looked straight at me. You were never really a father to me, Dad. You were a business owner who happened to live in our house. Everything was a transaction. Everything came with conditions. And I am so tired of sitting at your table, feeling like I have to earn the right to be your daughter. 33 years. Every school play, every scraped knee, every midnight drive to Nationwide Children's when she had croup at age 4. And I didn't sleep until I watched her breathing settle in that hospital bed at 6 in the morning, every soccer game in the rain. Every time I moved my schedule around something of hers without saying a word about it because it didn't need saying. Every single one of those things. And this is what she hands me on Christmas Eve at my own table. I sat with it for a moment. Marian's hand found my knee. Not a warning squeeze this time, just wait, the way you press a hand on a wound. I stood up slowly, the way a man stands up when he's already decided. Then I'll stop being the business owner you keep coming to for money. Not loud, didn't need to be loud. I folded my napkin and set it next to the untouched second piece of pie. I looked at Shane, who was staring at his one sheet like he wished it would open into something he could step inside. I looked at my daughter one more time. Then I walked out the front door, not dramatically, just out. I drove with no particular destination and ended up in the parking lot of the Henderson Road shop. The one I opened in 2009 and nearly lost in 2011 when I worked doubles for 8 months to keep it breathing. I sat in the truck with the heater running and watched the security light buzz over the empty lot. My phone went off 20 minutes later. Shane, you should know that the $20,000 was never documented as a loan. You called it a gift in front of witnesses at Easter dinner. If you're going to get legal about this relationship, we're prepared to do the same. I read it twice. Then I opened my glove compartment, took out the copy of the promissory note I had placed there 3 months ago, when my instincts had started getting louder than I liked, and confirmed it was still right where I'd left it. I typed back 4 words, I have the paperwork. I set the phone face down on the passenger seat and drove to the Marriott on Dublin Granville Road and checked in for the night. I didn't sleep much. Room service I didn't touch. I lay on top of the covers and ran the whole dinner back the way I used to run estimates, looking for the number that didn't match. 3 weeks earlier, I'd had a drink with Murray, my accountant, a man who's handled my books since the second shop opened. He mentioned over his second bourbon that he'd heard about a pre-IPO clean energy fund making rounds in Columbus and Denver. A few of his clients had been approached. He'd looked into it and found almost nothing. No SEC registration, no registered investment advisor, no verifiable portfolio history. The fund was called Lumis Ventures. I hadn't said anything to my daughter because I'd wanted to see how it would present itself. I know how that sounds. But 29 years of running a business has taught me there's exactly one way to know whether a man is honest, and that's to watch what he does when he thinks he isn't being watched. I'd been watching for 2 weeks. Marian called 9 times before midnight. I let 6 go to voicemail. Get home, she said when I finally picked up. She's been crying for an hour. She's on the bathroom floor. Then she has a lot to think about. She didn't mean it the way it came out. She chose her words, Marian. She didn't stumble. She set them down one at a time. Silence. Then quieter. Are you coming home tomorrow? Yes, I said, and hung up gently, which is harder than hanging up angry. I drove home Christmas morning. My daughter's car was still in the driveway. I hadn't expected that. She was in the kitchen when I came inside, hair pulled back, eyes swollen, holding her coffee mug in both hands like a life preserver. Marion was at the stove pretending to make eggs. I poured myself a cup and stood at the counter. She didn't look at me for a long moment. Then I'm sorry for what I said. Voice quiet and worn flat, the way voices get after crying has run itself out. Some of it I appreciate, I said. She looked up. The part about being transactional, I said, that's worth sitting with. The other part, the part about never being a real father, I'm going to need more time with that one. She had no answer. Shane came downstairs 20 minutes later, nodded at me, poured coffee, and stayed very quiet. It was the first smart thing he'd done all month. We got through the day, opened gifts. Nobody mentioned Lumis Ventures. I watched them pull out of the cul-de-sac that afternoon and let the quiet settle back in around me. She called 3 times the day after Christmas. I let them ring. By New Year's, she was texting, the long kind that start with "I've been thinking" and end somewhere complicated. I read every one and didn't answer, because there's a difference between a conversation and a deposition, and I needed the first one. What I did do, I called Murray on the 27th and asked him to pass everything he had on Lumis Ventures to his contact at the Ohio Division of Securities. Murray told me he'd already been in touch, so had one other accountant in the city. They were building a file. I also learned something else. Murray had a client who knew Becca, my daughter's college friend, the one who'd introduced them to this whole thing. Becca wasn't just a true believer sharing a good tip with people she cared about. She was listed on Lumis's internal documents as a referral agent, 12% commission on every dollar she walked through the door. She hadn't told my daughter that. She'd told her she was sharing something good with a friend. My daughter showed up at the Henderson Road shop on January 4th, no call first, just parked in the customer lot, and walked through the front door at 10 in the morning while I was going over payroll with my manager, Terry. Terry poked his head in. Your daughter's in the waiting room. Didn't want to interrupt. Tell her I'll be out in 10 minutes, I said, and I took the 10. She was sitting in one of the plastic chairs against the wall when I walked out, the kind nobody designs to be comfortable, because you're not supposed to want to stay. She had dark circles and the same coat from Christmas Eve, and she looked like someone who had stopped performing fine several days ago. You could have called, I said. You don't answer? Fair enough. I pulled a chair around and sat across from her instead of behind the counter. She looked at my hands. Old habit. She used to read my mood that way as a kid, and I kept them still. The money's gone, she said, all of it. Shane's 40,000? She nodded. And 30 more? He borrowed it from his parents last week to make the final transfer before the round closed. 70,000 total. Lumis's website is down. Becca isn't picking up. The Denver address on their paperwork goes to a UPS store. I let the silence sit the way a good estimate sits, long enough to mean something. I knew about Lumis before Christmas, I said. She went very still. Murray flagged it 3 weeks ago. No SEC registration, no registered investment advisor, no verifiable fund history. I'd already passed it to the Division of Securities before you ever sat down at my table. Before Christmas Eve dinner. Before Christmas Eve dinner. And you didn't tell me? The same way you didn't ask me to look into it before you came with a rehearsed pitch and a printed one sheet, I said. I'm not saying that to hurt you. I'm saying it because we both made choices that night, and they're both worth examining. She looked at her hands. Why didn't you just tell me at dinner instead of letting me? Her voice broke. Instead of letting me say all of that to you. Because you'd already decided I was the problem before you walked in, I said. If I'd put the SEC findings on the table right there, you'd have thought I manufactured them to get out of writing a check. Some things have to be learned by paying for them. I'm sorry that the tuition was this high. There's something else, I said after a moment, about Becca. She looked up. She wasn't an early investor who got lucky and wanted to share it with her friends. She was on Lumis's internal payroll as a referral agent, 12% on every dollar she brought in from outside contacts. She knew exactly what the fund was when she introduced you to it. The color left her face in one clean motion. She knew, my daughter said. It wasn't a question. The whole time, I said. Neither of us spoke. Outside, Terry had a car on the lift, and the pneumatic wrench was going in the rhythm I've been hearing for 34 years. I've always found it steadying. You brought me to your Christmas Eve dinner, she said slowly, and I told you that you were never really my father. And the whole time you already knew everything, and you just sat there and let it happen. I watched to see what Shane would do, I said. I already know who you are when you're scared and someone's telling you it's all going to work out fine. I've watched you for 28 years. She put her face in her hands. I gave her the time, Some things a person has to finish going through before you can bring them back up. When she came up, her eyes were red but steadier. I have to tell Shane to sell the truck, she said. I don't know how we make February rent. The spare room at the house is made up, I said. That's what you get right now. A room in Marion's cooking, not a check. And Shane gets a job, a real one. I've got a detailing bay at this shop that's been short 2 people for 4 months. Minimum wage to start. He shows up, he learns, he earns. If he's still standing in 6 months with something to show for it, we talk about what comes next. She stared at me. You'd hire Shane. I'd give Shane the chance to show me something. There's a difference. Whether he takes it is up to him. Shane took it. Showed up Monday in work clothes he'd bought over the weekend on time, without being reminded. He didn't talk much the first week. He watched and asked questions when he needed to, which is the right frequency. Terry told me end of week 1 that the kid worked hard and didn't complain about the cold, and from Terry that's roughly a formal commendation. My daughter moved into the spare room. She and Marion fell into a rhythm the way women sometimes do, filling space together without having to narrate it. I'd pass her in the kitchen in the mornings, and she'd have coffee ready because she'd learned my schedule the same way she used to know it when she was 15 and still paid attention. She didn't apologize again. The first one was real, but also scared. What came after it was different, quieter, more deliberate. She'd see me working late and bring in a glass of water without being asked. She'd pull the trash cans in from the curb on collection day without mentioning it. Small things that cost something to notice and follow through on. In late January, the Ohio Division of Securities announced a formal investigation into Lumis Ventures and 3 related shell entities. Becca's name was in the initial press release as a person of interest. Her Instagram went private the same afternoon. My daughter sent me the news link with no message attached, just the link. I texted back that I'd seen it. That was the whole conversation, and it was enough. I found her on a Sunday in late January in the garage, going through a box she'd brought from the Worthington apartment, things she'd grabbed before they'd had to surrender the lease. Mostly old photos, a shoebox from college. She didn't hear me come in. You keeping all of that? I said. She startled, then settled. Maybe she held up a photo, the 2 of us at her high school graduation. Me in a blue shirt squinting into the sun, her in the cap and gown laughing at something I'd said. I can't remember what I said that day. I just remember thinking I couldn't believe she'd grown up that fast, and that I didn't know if I was ready for whatever was coming next. I've been meaning to tell you something, I said. I sat down on the step beside her. She waited. Last October, before any of this, I had papers drawn up with my attorney, a 25% ownership stake in Henderson Road. Birthday present. April's still a few months out, so it's been sitting in my desk drawer. She went very still. It's a real business, I said. Real books, real manager, real contracts. You'd need to learn how to read a profit and loss statement and sit through some genuinely tedious vendor meetings. But it's something you could build on if you decided you wanted to. She was looking at the graduation photo. The promissory note, I said. I tore it up in December, before Christmas. Last we'll speak of it. Her eyes filled. Quietly, the way eyes fill when something's been held a long time and finally doesn't have to be anymore. You already had all that, she said. While I was sitting at your table telling you that you were never really a father to me? I had it the whole time? She laughed. It cracked at the edge, but it was real. The first real laugh I'd heard from her in over a month. Why didn't you just give it to me before everything fell apart? Because a woman who walks through the door with a rehearsed pitch for $120,000 and inherits her father's business the same week doesn't understand what she's been given. She values what cost her something to earn. And I needed to know you were sorry because you understood what you'd done, not because you needed something from me again. She put the graduation photo back in the box. We sat on the garage step for a while. The heat had clicked off and it was cold enough to see our breath, but neither of us moved inside. Some men think strength means nothing ever reaching you. I spent a good part of my life believing something close to it. But you get to 62, and you start to understand that the real work isn't protecting yourself from pain. It's deciding what to do while you're in it. I could have written that check at Christmas dinner, covered for my daughter's judgment the same quiet way I'd been covering for it for 2 years. She would have been grateful and temporary, and we would have been exactly who we'd been to each other for a decade. Her asking, me providing, neither of us ever finding out what the other one was actually built from. Instead, I let the truth finish what the truth does when you stop blocking it. Watching my daughter carry her own weight for the first time in her adult life, watching her wake up early and make coffee and drive her husband to work, On mornings, he was cutting it close. That cost me more than any check I could have signed, and was worth more than anything in my desk drawer. The steak in Henderson Road is still sitting in that drawer. She gets it in April, on her birthday, same as I planned, but she'll be a different person when she opens it, and so will I.